William Shakespeare was born in 1564 in England. Little records of Shakespeare's early life exist. It is believed by scholars that he was the third of 6 children belonging to John Shakespeare and Mary Arden. In November of 1582, Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. Together they had 3 children, one of whom died at age 11. In the 1590s, Shakespeare belonged to an acting company in England called the King's Men. Here he earned a living as an actor and a playwright, publishing his works as popular literature. By 1597, 15 of Shakespeare's plays were published. 2 years later, Shakespeare and his business partners built their own theater, which they named the Globe. Shakespeare then purchased real estate, making him an entrepreneur. This nearly doubled his worth and allowed him to finance his plays. It is rumored that Shakespeare died on his birthday, April 23, 1616, leaving most of his possessions to his oldest daughter, Susanna. We know Shakespeare today as the world's greatest writer of the English language. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's leaf hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou'st, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. When in eternal lines to time thou growest, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. What is underlined, eye of heaven shines, and death brag, are examples of personification. The setting takes place in the summer, and the speaker is a lover. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day is an example of iambic pentameter. It is also an example of metaphysical conceit. This sonnet is called a Shakespearean sonnet because it was written by Shakespeare. A tonal shift occurs in the third quatrain when the poem stops talking about the weaknesses of summer and begins talking about the greatnesses of summer. The purpose of this poem is to explain from one lover to another that their love will never die as seasons do. In the first 11 lines of the poem, the speaker is comparing his lover to a summer's day. He states that she is more lovely and more temperate. In the final quatrain of this poem, the speaker states that his lover is different from that of a summer's day. Thy eternal summer shall not fade. The speaker is stating that the way he feels for his beloved will never die as the seasons do, because his love for her is expressed in his poem, which will serve as a constant reminder. When this poem was written, people viewed love as something that was sacred. It is relevant today because love is a timeless theme and is something that everyone can relate to. From fairest creatures we desire increase. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die, but as the ripper should by time decrease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feedst thy flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe, too sweet, self too cruel. That thou art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring. Within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste and niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due by the grave in thee. This setting is not mentioned in this poem. The speaker in this poem is a friend. This sonnet is also a Shakespearean sonnet. From fairest creatures we desire increase is an example of iambic pentameter. The tonal shift occurs in the first quatrain when the speaker of the poem stops admiring his friend for his beauty and begins to criticize him for not having a family. The purpose of this poem is for the speaker to convince his friend to create an heir so that man's beauty might live on through his family. The speaker draws his imagery from the beauty of everyday life, such as a beauty's rose or gaudy spring. This poem's theme is about beauty and selfishness. The first line in the quatrain 1 states, "From fairest creatures we desire increase." That means that we wish for nature to reproduce so that its beauty may live on. The second quatrain violates this premise, "But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes." This means that a young man is not sharing his beauty with the rest of the world. As the poem goes on, it tries to convince the young man that his beauty will disappear if he does not share it. The poem then tells the young man to reproduce, and if he refuses, then he will become a glutton, or someone who is excessively greedy, because he refuses to obey nature's premise. When this poem was written, beauty was viewed differently than it is viewed today. Back then, women who were a little plump were viewed as beautiful. Now women are only viewed as beautiful if they are a size 2 and wear a mask of makeup. Andrew Marvell was born in 1621 in Yorkshire. When his father changed occupations, he and his family moved to Hull, where Marvell attended grammar school. He later attended Trinity College, where he attained his B.A. in 1638. Marvell traveled abroad to many different countries, including France, Holland, Switzerland, Italy, and Spain, where he was employed as a tutor. There in Spain is where he wrote to his coy mistress. He continued to write when he returned to London. Some of his famous works from that time period are The Rehearsal Transposed, a short historical essay concerning general councils, creeds, and impositions in matters of religion, and an account of the growth of popery and arbitrary government in England. In 1677 he then died of a fever. 4 years later, in 1681, much of his poetry was published. To his coy mistress. A metaphysical conceit/metaphor occurs in line 11 when Marvell compares love to a vegetable. The speaker in this poem is a lover. The speaker is an iambic tetrameter with 8 syllables per line. The setting is not mentioned in this poem. The tonal shift occurs in the 3rd section of the poem when the speaker appears desperate to win over his lady. The purpose of this poem is to convince a female lover to seize the day and sleep with the speaker. The inversion in this poem occurs in line 5 when the speaker references the Ganges River in Asia. A hyperbole occurs in lines 8 through 10 when the speaker says that his love cannot be bound by time. This poem's theme is about time and love. The speaker in this poem is a lover who believes that he and his lady should not waste time courting one another. He believes that they should take advantage of the time that they have and sleep with one another in the present. When this poem was written, people viewed sex as something that was sacred and happened only after courtship and marriage. Yet in this poem, a lover is trying to seduce his beloved by telling her that they should not waste time. This poem is relevant today because a lot of people don't reserve sex for marriage because they want to live in the present. Works cited.